I suppose most people would say I've got it all together. 40, still young, still beautiful by many standards. When I catch my reflection, I see the same green eyes, the same curve of cheekbones that used to draw looks in my 20s. Strangers still notice me. Their eyes linger, their glances filled with questions they don't dare speak aloud. Sometimes I wonder if they see something I've forgotten about myself. My husband doesn't notice anymore. Or maybe he does, but only to compare. I see the way his gaze drifts across the room at restaurants, how his smile seems brighter when it's directed at someone else. I don't confront him. Not because I'm naive, but because I'm afraid. Afraid of what I already know. Afraid of confirming that my marriage has become a shadow of what it once was. It's not just the betrayal. It's the emptiness. And then there's my son. 21, tall, and carved from something stronger than his father ever was. He walks into a room and the space shifts around him. There's something protective in the way he moves, how he watches me. Especially when his father's gaze wanders. Sometimes I catch the way his jaw tightens, how his fists clench at his sides like he's fighting the impulse to step in. His anger is quiet, simmering beneath the surface, but I feel it like a pulse beneath my skin. I remember the first time I noticed the shift between us. It was small, barely a moment, but it lingered long after. We were in the kitchen, just the two of us. His father had stepped out to take a work call, though we both knew it was likely another woman. I was washing dishes, and he came up behind me, silent as always, and reached for a glass from the cabinet above. His arm brushed mine, and I flinched, not from fear, but from something warmer, something unfamiliar. He didn't move away immediately. Instead, his hand rested briefly at my lower back, a gesture meant to steady me, maybe. But my breath caught. I felt it, the weight of his presence, the silent tension growing in that narrow space between us. And then it was gone. He pulled away, murmured something about helping me with dinner, and the moment faded into the clatter of plates and boiling water. But I carried it with me. I still do. Sometimes, late at night when I lie in bed listening to the distant sound of my husband's snores, I wonder what life would be like if I were truly alone. If I had the courage to leave, to start over. But then I remember the silence of this house, how empty it already feels even with 3 people living inside. I wonder if being alone would feel any different. The truth is, I already am. And yet, when my son is near, something inside me stirs. Not in a way I can name. Not in a way I can explain. But in those fleeting glances, in the way his voice softens when he says, "Mom," I feel something return to me. Something I thought I'd lost. His father doesn't see it. He's too distracted, too busy chasing a version of himself he probably never was.
But my son, he sees me.
All of me. And in those quiet moments, when it's just the two of us, I wonder if he knows that I see him too. It was after another fight, one of those tired, sharp-edged arguments that left me hollow instead of angry. My husband had said something cruel, something dismissive about the way I looked, how I used to be beautiful. He always said things like that when he was losing ground, retreating behind insults instead of owning his failures. I had nothing left to say. I stood at the sink, washing the same glass 3 times just to keep my hands from shaking. James had heard it. He always heard it, even when he pretended not to. But that night, he didn't retreat to his room like he usually did. He walked into the kitchen with quiet purpose, tall and still as a statue carved from storm clouds. His eyes weren't angry, not in the way I expected. They were steady, unshakable. "This ends today," he said, his voice low but resolute. "Once and for all. You don't deserve to be treated like this." I blinked at him, the words catching in my chest. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came. Not comfort, not fear. Only a trembling silence. He stepped closer, gently reaching out, not to pull me into a hug, not to lift me or hold me, but just to touch my face. A single, deliberate gesture. Then, just before he turned to leave, he pressed his lips to my temple.
Soft.
Reverent. Final. I stood there long after he was gone, the heat of his kiss lingering on my skin like a mark from the sun. I didn't even notice my husband had left the house. My thoughts tangled like vines, pulling me into a memory I didn't want to admit I was holding on to. James had always been gentle with me, even when he was a boy. But now he was something else entirely. A man. A protector. He had grown into someone who didn't flinch when the world turned cruel. And standing there in that kitchen, I realized I believed him. If he said it ended today, then it would. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Not because of locks or walls or the illusion of a marriage, but because of him. Later that evening, I sat in the quiet of the living room, the lights low, a cup of untouched tea cooling in my hands. I kept hearing his words, playing them over in my mind like a prayer. You don't deserve to be treated like this. And the way he kissed me like a promise. A part of me was ashamed at how much that moment meant. But another part, deeper and more honest, clung to it. In that kiss, I felt seen. Chosen. Not just pitied or protected, but understood. I wondered what he was thinking now. Where he had gone. What he might be planning. The house was too quiet without him. And I hated how much I missed his presence already. But more than that, I hated how much I needed it. It was dark outside when I heard the front gate creak open. I peered through the window, heart caught in my throat, and then I saw him.
James.
Calm, tall, unwavering. His hands moved with quiet precision, placing suitcase after suitcase on the grass just outside our fence. My husband's things. I opened the door, the cool night air wrapping around me like a question. James, what are you doing? He didn't look at me right away. He simply zipped the final bag and set it down gently beside the others, as if even in fury, he refused to be careless. Then he turned, meeting my eyes with that quiet intensity that had begun to define him. I told you this ends today, he said softly.
And it has.
He won't come back here, not to hurt you, not to speak to you like that again.
I wanted to say something.
I should have. But all I could do was stand there, stunned, torn between disbelief and an emotion that felt dangerously close to gratitude. Maybe even something warmer, heavier. He stepped forward, close enough for me to smell the faint scent of his cologne, woodsy, clean, familiar. Now, he said, his tone shifting into something lighter, almost teasing. Go pack. We're leaving. I blinked. Leaving. James grinned, a real smile this time, wide and boyish, the kind of smile that used to light up my world when he was little. But there was nothing boyish in the way he looked at me now. We're going on vacation, he said.
To the Maldives.
I gasped. James, why would you? Because you deserve to remember what it feels like to live.
To breathe.
And you deserve to do it somewhere beautiful. I stared at him, speechless, until he leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. Go pack, he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. I'll handle the rest. He turned and walked inside, casually tossing his jacket over the couch as if it were any other day, not the day he exiled his own father from our lives. I stood there in the doorway for a long time. Later, as I packed, still dazed by everything unfolding, he knocked lightly on my door. When I opened it, he was already halfway down the hall with his duffel over his shoulder, ready. I whispered, "Thank you." He turned, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen them, and I stepped closer, lifting myself slightly on my toes to kiss his cheek. It was innocent. It had to be. But something flickered between us. Just a beat. A pause that stretched a little too long. From that moment something shifted. Not drastically. Not in words. But in the quiet glances, in the way we moved around each other. Aware of our closeness in a way we never had been before. As I zipped my suitcase and joined him by the front door, I realized something strange. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of being alone. Not of leaving the house behind. And especially not of being with him. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? James's words echoed through my head, bouncing between disbelief and something far more dangerous. Hope. Not the kind of vague, someday kind of hope I used to whisper to myself in the quiet dark, but the jarring kind, the kind that changes things. He had taken control of something I never dared to touch. He had removed the man who once filled our home with careless glances and colder silences. My husband. Ex-husband now, I supposed. The reality hadn't caught up to me yet. I packed slowly, pausing often, unsure of what I was really preparing for. A vacation, yes, but it felt like more than that. It felt like an unraveling of fear, of rules, of everything that had quietly bound me for years. Morning came in a golden blur, the sun spilling over the floor like a promise. When I walked into the kitchen, James was already there, his strong back facing me, his movements calm, focused. He had made coffee. My favorite blend. It was a small thing, but it stole my breath, because my husband never remembered what kind I liked. "Did you sleep?" he asked without turning. "No," I admitted. He looked over his shoulder, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Me neither." I sat at the counter, watching him pour coffee into 2 mugs. He placed one in front of me with such quiet care, it almost broke something in me. I stared at the rising steam and asked, "Are you sure about this?" James leaned on the opposite side of the counter, his gaze unwavering. I've never been more sure about anything. That answer should have comforted me. And, in a way, it did.
But it also scared me.
Because there was something new in the way he looked at me, something protective, yes, but also reverent. He didn't look at me like a boy looks at his mother. He looked at me like a man looks at the one thing he spent his life trying to keep safe. That afternoon, we boarded the plane. First class, he had spared no expense. I watched him settle into the seat beside me with an ease that made him seem older than his years. His shoulders broad, his jaw tight with quiet determination. My little boy was long gone. And this man beside me, he had taken his place in a way I wasn't prepared for. During the flight, I tried to read, to distract myself. But the air between us was thick with things neither of us said. He sat close, our arms brushing now and then. Each time, I felt it, like a static spark beneath my skin, alive and unignorable. At one point, I glanced at him from behind the edge of my book and caught him watching me. He didn't look away. "You're beautiful when you concentrate," he said quietly. I laughed, unsure whether to dismiss the comment or lean into it. "Don't tease me." "I'm not." I looked down, pretending to read, but my heart pounded loud enough to drown out the words on the page. When we landed, the air was thick with tropical heat and salt. The Maldives didn't look real, just shades of turquoise and white stretching out into forever. The resort James had booked was on a private island. Our bungalow stood above the water, connected by a long wooden pier. Isolated. Quiet. A world away from everything I knew. Inside, the space was beautiful. Open, airy, decorated in soft earth tones and touches of gold. One bedroom I noticed. One large bed. My breath caught. James noticed too. "I can ask for a second bungalow," he offered, voice careful. "No," I said too quickly. Then, softening, "No, it's fine. We'll manage." That evening, we stood barefoot on the beach, the sun sinking into the sea like a slow sigh. He handed me a glass of wine, and we sat in silence, toes buried in the warm sand. I turned to look at him, this man who used to be a boy who clung to my hand crossing the street. Now he looked at me with something fierce in his eyes, something I couldn't label without my voice shaking. "Why are you really doing this?" I asked him. He didn't answer right away. The waves whispered secrets behind us. "Because I want you to remember what it feels like to be cherished," he said finally. "Because I've watched you give your heart to someone who never deserved it. And because," he paused, looking at me like I was the only thing that existed, "you deserve more than just survival. You deserve peace, beauty, joy." I looked away. I had to. His words scraped too close to something raw inside me. My throat ached. Then, without thinking, I reached for his hand. He didn't flinch. He didn't question it. His fingers wrapped around mine, steady and warm. We sat like that until the stars came out, his hand in mine, the ocean breathing beside us. That night, we lay in bed, backs turned to each other but not touching. The air between us buzzed. I couldn't sleep. I could feel him behind me, every breath he took, the quiet tension of his body holding still. Then I heard his voice, low and hesitant. "Are you happy?" I stared into the dark. "I don't know yet."
A pause.
"But I feel safe." I didn't see his smile, but I heard it in his voice. "Good." Sleep came slowly. But when it did, it was the deepest rest I'd known in years. And when I woke in the early morning light, James was already awake, lying beside me, watching me quietly.
He didn't speak.
Neither did I. But something in me knew. We had crossed into something new. Something tender. Something terrifying. And I wasn't sure I ever wanted to go back. I blinked the sleep from my eyes and smiled at him, and he smiled back, something soft and proud in it, as if he was just glad I was there beside him.
"Morning," he said gently.
"Morning," I echoed, my voice still hazy. We didn't speak for a while. There was no need. The silence between us had changed. It was no longer heavy or uncertain. It had become its own kind of language, full of things we weren't ready to say, but no longer needed to. Eventually, James sat up, stretching his arms behind his head before standing. The light caught his profile, strong and calm, etched in sunlight. Then he turned back toward me, grinning with a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Come on," he said, walking to the edge of the bed and lowering himself to the floor on one knee, his back turned to me. "Get on." I stared at him, baffled. "What?" He patted his shoulder. "Your ride awaits." "James." He tilted his head back, still grinning. "Come on, princess. Get on your horse." I laughed, really laughed. That kind of laugh that shakes the cobwebs off old parts of your heart. I hadn't felt that light in years. "You're ridiculous," I said, but I climbed up anyway, my arms circling his neck, my legs draped around his waist. I could feel his body tense slightly to balance me, and I tightened my grip instinctively. "Hold on," he said with mock seriousness. "Your stallion has a mind of his own." "Don't you drop me, James," I warned, laughing even more. He stood and carried me through the open doorway, out onto the sun-drenched deck. The wind caught my hair, and the world shimmered with light and sea spray. Below us, the water glowed with impossible shades of blue, like a living painting. Without hesitation, he walked down the small ladder and stepped into the shallow water, warm and clear, with me still on his back. The ocean cradled us both, salt and sun painting our skin. I clung to him, resting my cheek against the back of his shoulder, eyes closed, heart full. His hands gently supported my thighs as he moved through the water with steady, powerful steps. There was nothing but the sound of water around us, the occasional distant call of a seabird, and the soft sound of my own breath syncing with his. "I haven't felt this free in, I don't know how long," I murmured. "You should always feel like this," he said. He waded deeper into the ocean until the water reached just below his chest. There, he stopped, and I slowly slid down from his back into the water, facing him. His hands didn't leave me. They remained gently at my waist, grounding me, even in the buoyant sea. The silence returned, but it was different this time. Tighter, warmer. He was so close, and our laughter had dissolved into something quieter, more electric. I searched his face, trying to find the line we were walking. He looked back at me without blinking, his brow just slightly furrowed like he was trying to memorize every detail. My hands found his shoulders, instinctively, and I realized how small they felt compared to him now. When did he grow into this man? When did I start looking at him like this? "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" he asked, his voice low. "For making me feel like I'm not alone." His gaze deepened, his eyes scanning mine. "You're not." My breath caught in my throat. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. His fingers lingered. My skin buzzed beneath his touch, not because it was unexpected, but because it felt like it had always been waiting for that exact moment. I could have stepped back. I should have. But I didn't. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. I didn't move. My heart thundered, not with fear, but with a strange, aching clarity. And then he kissed me. Not hard, not rushed, just soft, slow, and impossibly tender. The kind of kiss that said I see you, not as a mother, not as someone to be protected, but as a woman who had spent too long pretending she was content with empty gestures and polite silences. When we pulled apart, I didn't look away.
Neither did he.
The sea surrounded us. Gentle, unjudging. A world far from everything we'd left behind. I didn't speak and he didn't ask. The moment stood on its own. Later, when we returned to the bungalow, I dried my hair in silence while he cooked us something simple, grilled fish, a fresh salad, and wine. We sat on the deck again, watching the sunset like nothing had changed. But everything had. And somewhere inside me, I knew this was only the beginning.